Hello and welcome to today's webinar. I know you wonder where is our great Sunil Ji. He may join in later or may not. We are not 100% sure about it as he is on travel. So I welcome you, Kṣaṇāti.
Blessings. Thank you, Ange.
And we are very much grateful to you for today's session. It will be a wonderful and in detail session where people will have the possibility to answer questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you have also done the research upon 2 to 3 people before I had.
Mm-hmm.
So you will answer their points and questions in detail.
Mm-hmm.
And later on, we will have the possibility also of live questions.
Wonderful.
Yes. And I request all the people to please ask your questions, ask your doubts, and let us know when anything is not as clear as you would like it to have. And I know Kṣaṇāti will do his absolute best to make us a little bit more perfect in this technique. Yeah?
I will.
So I hand over to you, Kṣaṇāti, and you may speak a little bit about it or start with your presentation as you like.
Okay. Namaste, everyone. Thank you, Inge, Bettina, sir. It's a blessing to be here with all of you. I'm so excited to do my second session on astrocartography today. It's very exciting research, and as I get to do these presentations, I'm also doing so much research and learning so much more about the art of astrocartography. So it's a real blessing for me. And even though Sunil is not here, I can feel his spirit and his energy very strongly. And I just wanted to start by thanking Sunil for all of the amazing work he does and the incredible awareness he brings to the community. So today we're going to be focusing on love, romance, and marriage-related astrocartography. So I am going to quickly put my PowerPoint presentation here, and we will get started. It'll just take 1 second. Okay, is that, can everyone see the PowerPoint?
Perfectly clear.
Okay, wonderful. So this will be the second series in terms of astrocartography, the geography of destiny. So how can we achieve the 4 traditional Vedic aims of life, dharma, artha, kama, and moksha, through the use of astrocartography in conjunction with Jyotish? And this is a very exciting, innovative aspect of astrology. And so we'll be focusing on kama today, as well as the ability to achieve marriage, romance, love through the astrocartography paradigm. The basic setup for today's session is to discuss the significations for romance, love, and marriage as it relates to astrocartography. So what are some of the aspects that we look at in terms of the birth chart and the cartography when we're trying to see romance, love, and marriage? And also how to encourage these things using astrocartography. What are some techniques that I've researched that we can use to incorporate in order to encourage romance, love, and marriage? Because the great question is, where will I find my love? Where will I find romance? Where is an auspicious place for me to find a spiritual partner or a romantic partner? And so these are questions we are going to look at in detail today. I have a personal example, which means I've used my life and my charts as an example. I also have a celebrity example because I thought that would be exciting, and there's some juiciness to that celebrity example. And then I want to dive into answering all of your questions, everyone. Any questions you may have about romance, love, marriage, and how astrocartography might fit into that for you. And I have some examples that I received prior to the session today that I did some research on, so we'll dive into those examples as well. So some of the primary significations for romance, love, and marriage in astrocartography. So when it comes to finding romance, love, and marriage using astrocartography, we want to keep it rather simple. Yes, the nakshatras have importance. Yes, the aspects have importance. But to keep it simple, we're going to focus on the planets, houses, and signs when it comes to the astrocartography for romance, love, and marriage. Now, we're going to have signification, planets, houses, and signs that are going to show special aspects for the romance, love, and marriage cartography. For example, the planets in my research that have the greatest signification for romance, love, and marriage are the Sun, the Moon, and Venus. So these planets will have key signification in how to locate our potential romantic success, our wife, our husband, our marriage energies, our romance energies. The Sun, the Moon, and Venus are going to have special signification. In terms of the houses, the Lagna is going to have some key aspects that are relevant. The 4th house, the 5th house, the 7th house, and the 9th house. And the 5th, 7th, and the Lagna are kind of the emphasis, and the 4th and 9th also have some influence in the romance, love, and marriage astrocartography. And we'll go into detail about that.
That is good. Wonderful.
Now, the primary signification signs for romance, love, and marriage, these signs generally have an influence, are Taurus, Cancer, and Libra. You will notice that 2 of those signs are ruled by the planet Venus. And so Venus has a high indication or high aspect of having a strong influence on romance, love, and marriage in our lifetime. But planets, houses, and signs outside of all of these significations we mentioned can still have a great influence on the romance, love, and marriage in our lives. But these significations we mentioned, Sun, Moon, Venus, Lagna, 4th, 5th, 7th, and 9th, Taurus, Cancer, and Libra, all of these have a strong influence, generally speaking, on the romance-related astrocartography. Okay, so how do we exactly encourage romance, love, and marriage using astrocartography? One of the things that we have to do is take the astrocartography and compare that to the natal chart, to the birth chart of the individual. So much like we did in terms of career, life, purpose, artha, we're going to apply these significations, which are for romance and love, to the astrocartography. That romance, love, and marriage, in terms of how do we encourage this, cannot be found alone using the natal chart, and it cannot be found alone using the astrocartography. Both of these things must be used in harmony and balance together, and there must be a comparison that goes on between the two. So, for example, the Venus, Moon, and Sun lines, because these are the planets that have signification for love, romance, and marriage, they all hold contributions to these areas, and I mentioned that Venus being the primary. But based on their position in the birth chart, in the natal chart, it can either support these significations or it can discourage or eliminate these significations. So just because Venus, Moon, and the Sun have general significations in terms of love, romance, and marriage, that depending on the birth chart, this can either support that or discourage that. So it's not black and white. There's certainly a gray area here.
In terms of this gray area, what does it mean? It means that on one hand, the card can have some significations and...
Yeah, like for example, the Sun has significations for romance, love, and marriage. But if Sun is located in the 12th house, in moksha bhava for the individual, it has less significations for the marriage. But if the Sun is located in the 5th house or the 7th house, it has even stronger significations for the marriage. So even though the sun has significations, depending on what house the sun is in, it can either support that or discourage it.
Right.
Okay. So planets located in the Lagna, 4th, 5th, 7th, and 9th house hold special influence in their planetary lines towards romance, love, and marriage. And the Lagna, 5th, and 7th houses being the primary aspects. So the planets we mentioned, when they're in the Lagna, 5th, or 7th houses, they almost always have to do with love and marriage significations. And then we also find that sometimes when they're in the 4th house or the 9th house, that they also have significations. And I've done a little bit of philosophical meditation and research on this. And the 4th house is the house of the home and the house of the mother. And so this has a strong influence on the relationship as well. And the 9th house being the house of our dharma, being the house of the guru, the spiritual partner is the greatest guru. And I think that is why some of these significations show up there as well. Planets located in Venus signs, Taurus and Libra, as well as Cancer sometimes within the natal chart, also hold special significations for romance, love, and marriage. So if you have the sun, moon, or Venus in Taurus, Cancer, or Libra, that house will have some significations. That conjunction will have some significations in terms of the love, romance, and marriage. And we'll see some of these show up in the different examples. So in addition to all of the planets, houses, and sign significations that we mentioned, there are also some other aspects that are very important in understanding how the cartography might influence romance, love, and marriage. Some of these include the planetary dignities, the exaltation or debilitation of these planets, whether they are in a friend sign, whether they are an enemy sign. It certainly affects the achievability of our marriage. And then also the position of these planets, what house they're in. Are they conjunct with any other planets that they are friends or enemies with? These have important aspects as well. And also the bola, the planetary strength as relates to these significations. These also have important aspects.
Wonderful.
So the first example I have is my own example. Everyone gets a sneak peek at my astrological chart here. So everyone, you get to know me in a more profound way. I have both the North Indian chart and the South Indian chart here. So whichever you prefer to look at is totally up to you. So it's important to know some of these key aspects before we go into my chart that we mentioned in the earlier aspect as significations. The one that is mainly going to influence me is my 9th house here. So we mentioned that Libra as a sign has significations, and so does Venus and Moon. So we have Moon and Venus in the sign of Libra. And this is going to have a great amount of significations in terms of how I found my wife, how I found love, romance, and marriage as it relates to my chart. And it being in the 9th house here of the dharma of the guru also has some special significations in my chart. And one of the reasons I chose my chart as an example is because when I was experiencing this, I could not believe the accuracy of the astrocartography. All of these significations that were becoming true for me at the time that I was experiencing them. So I think it would be nice to share those all with you.
Cool. Thank you.
Now, this is my astrocartography map. And the main thing I want to point out is that over here is where I was born along this sun line here in the city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. My sun is prominent in the 10th house in Scorpio. So this has always been a place for me where I can achieve success, prosperity, indications for my career, indications for my life purpose. I'm closely located to this line right now. Now, the other line that I really want to mention is these Moon and Venus lines here in the Midwest United States. The Moon being in Albuquerque and the Venus being here in East New Mexico. It's a very important signification here because of my Moon and Venus in the 9th house in Libra. This lines here have very profound significations in terms of my ability to achieve love, romance, and marriage in my lifetime. These lines here. So basically, in other words, my relationships before I found my wife along this sun line were not quite as prosperous as my relationship when I found my wife. It was a very quick knowing that we were soulmates to each other. And so it's just this energy that kind of suggests that where these significations lie, your soulmate might be waiting for you there, or you might meet your soulmate along these lines. And it's a question that the research has shown that that cartography can really give great influence in our ability to find our soul partner.
Wow,
But
amazing.
as we go into the notes here, I just want everyone to remember my moon and Venus here in New Mexico, because that's going to have special signification for me.
But it happened quite naturally.
It did.
Yeah.
It did.
So you, in a previous interview, you were also telling that somehow this worked like a magnet.
Yes,
You were drawn
especially,
to it.
and the magnet has a lot to do with the Mahadasha or the Antardasha. These things show as a great influence, and that even when the malefic planets sometimes are in our Mahadasha or Antardasha, that those planetary lines become less malefic. So because these cartography lines pull us like magnets, if you are in Rahu Madasha, it makes a lot more sense for you to spend more time along your Rahu astrocartography line, even if Rahu is malefic. But again, with the Rahu line, you don't want to be there for a permanent amount of time. You don't want to stay there. But you will be much more successful for a longer period of time near your Rahu line in your Rahu Mahadasha than you will be at any other time of your life.
It will be
Yeah,
quite
makes
turbulent.
sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It will. Yes, it will always be unpredictable there. Yeah.
Unpredictable but turbulent. That's why you may have the feeling to escape from that line. Yeah.
Yes, it's chaotic.
Mm.
Yeah. So jumping back into the example here, I mentioned that the primary example that I want to use for me is that I have a Moon and Venus conjunction in the sign of Libra in the 9th house of my birth chart. Now, I showed in the previous map that my Moon and Venus are located here in New Mexico. That is the location in which I met my wife. So both the cartography lines as well as the Venus, Moon, Libra, and 9th house significations are all aligning for me to meet my wife in New Mexico, which is very fascinating. So in terms of the magnets and the Antardasha, this is especially significant. So I was in a Saturn Mahadasha, and I still am currently in a Saturn Mahadasha. But I entered and I am ruled by Saturn, so it's a little more favorable than necessarily a Saturn Mahadasha for everybody. But I entered my Saturn moon period, my moon Antardasha, November 2014. Now, 1 month after moving to New Mexico to study Ayurveda with Dr. Vasant Lad. So I entered my moon Antardasha, my moon in the 9th house of the Guru, my moon in Albuquerque, New Mexico, to study the ancient science of Ayurveda with Dr. Vasant Lad. And it's important to know that even though Dr. Lad would never consider himself to be a guru, that I still very much hold him in the light as a guru. And he has taught me so much and is a great teacher for me. So one of the significations of the moon in the 9th house and me going into my moon Antardasha is that also showing Dr. Vasant Lad as a guru for me, showing up as a great teacher for me. Moon Antardasha as well as the moon cartography lines activated my 9th house. So when I went into the moon Antardasha, it caused an influence for me to go to New Mexico, and I began working with a new guru, with Dr. Vasant Lad, and this shows great significations by my 9th house as well, even outside of the romantic marriage aspect. So when you take all of these aspects or significations of romance, love, and marriage, Moon, Venus, Libra, ninth house, and you take the astrocartography lines of Moon and Venus in New Mexico, there began to be a signification for me to meet my wife and develop a relationship to this person. So we began our relationship about 50% into the Antardasha, which means we started dating about 50% into the Moon Antardasha. And then about 3/4 of the way through Antardasha, I proposed to my wife to become married. And so we became engaged about 75% way into the Antardasha. And again, all of these significations of Moon, Venus, Libra, and the ninth house, and the Moon in New Mexico, and the Moon being conjunct with Libra has strong significations. And then 2 weeks after my Antardasha ended, we were married. So pretty much throughout the Antardasha of the Moon, with my Moon in New Mexico and my Moon with Venus in Libra in the ninth house, I found my wife, I began dating my wife, I became engaged to my wife, and at the end of the period, I was married to my wife. So this astrocartography could not be stronger in terms of suggesting some of these energies of my wife. I was meant to meet my wife in New Mexico. Now, the reason that the ninth house has special signification is that marriage is a key aspect of the dharma, and the partner is the greatest guru. And so, in a sense, if you look at my wife's chart, if you look at my chart, one of the strongest aspects of our relationship is that we are always learning and growing together. For example, my wife, she has a Jupiter in the seventh house. So there's a lot of growth and a learning through the relationship. There's a guru vibration there for her. Also, for me, I have Ketu in the seventh house of marriage. So part of my experience to moksha, part of my liberation in this lifetime, it is connected to my wife. And so this has ninth house influences as well, showing that specifically for me, there's a great amount of spiritual guru moksha vibrations as well in my relationship to my wife. It's also worth mentioning that the Moon and Venus in the ninth house is a female guru. And my guru has always been Amaji, Amritananda Mayima. And it was during this Moon Antardasha that I asked Amaji to marry us. She granted us permission to become married. And then at the end of the Antardasha, she actually performed the marriage ceremony. So it also shows that my female guru being involved in the marriage, helping give us permission, and then facilitating the marriage. And in a sense, the female guru blessing our marriage, helping us bring our karmas closer together by the grace of the guru. So Jai Amaji, and thank you for listening to this example. I hope it has given some insight into the real power of astrocartography as relates to romance, love, and marriage.
Absolutely amazing. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So we can also time events with this.
Yes. We can time events, especially in this predictive sense, when we take the significations of romance, love, and marriage, align them with our Mahadasha or our Antardasha periods, and then seeing where those cartography lines are.
Wonderful. So you just mentioned the Mahadasha and the Antardasha.
Mm-hmm.
So you're only going 2 levels. You're not going into the 3rd level of Tri-Antardasha.
Sometimes I look at these more subtle dasha periods as well, but I've noticed the greatest amount of significations in terms of like serious moves from the Mahadasha and the Antardasha. But if someone is constantly moving throughout their lives, not really settled in one location, then these more subtle dasha periods, which shift every few weeks, are more influential. But in terms of the drastic moves where we move from living in one location to another, or we move from being in one location for a very long time to another location, the Mahadasha and the Antardasha have the most significance.
Okay, makes sense. Great. Thank you.
So that was my personal example, and now I have a celebrity example. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have seen the chart of Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt. They're this big power celebrity couple, and it's very interesting because Angelina Jolie recently shifted periods, so did Brad Pitt, and they're going through a divorce right now. But we're not going to really be discussing the divorce as much as we're going to be discussing how their relationship started and some of the astrocartography and chart significations that had to do with. It was very interesting when I began to do this research. So let's start looking at their charts here. This is the different versions of their charts, and I will be flashing back to those as well.
Okay.
So to the left here, we have Brad Pitt astrocartography. And to the right here, we have Angelina Jolie astrocartography. And so I will keep flashing back to these cartography maps as we continue to go forward. So one thing that is really interesting is, in addition to showing all the beautiful positive aspects of romance, love, and marriage, the chart, the cartography, that the chart and the cartography can also show these more difficult aspects or these more challenging aspects.
Okay.
Such as affairs, such as cheating on your husband or wife, such as deception, such as confusion, such as the divorce. All these things, in addition to the success of the love and marriage, can also show these darker karmic aspects, like the infidelity that one might experience. So Angelina Jolie began her relationship with Brad Pitt while he was still married to another actress, Jennifer Aniston. Now, Angelina Jolie was in her Venus-Rahu period at that time. This is very significant because she is a Venus ascendant, so a very strong Venus. And then also her Rahu is here in the 5th house of romance, of attraction. So this combination of Venus and Rahu working together could have been one of the, especially the Rahu, could have been one of the main influences why Angelina Jolie had an affair with Brad Pitt versus it was a more, there was deception, there was confusion, there was these darker energies that sometimes Rahu can help suggest. And with Rahu being in the 5th house, it can show this attraction from a dark aspect. So this is a very strong aspect that went into Angelina Jolie's cartography and her karma at that time. Now,
wow.
her Rahu being in the 5th house of attraction and romance reflects the development of her relationship with Brad Pitt at that time. The fact that he was married at that time, there was also a surprise pregnancy during this time. Rahu is in the 5th house of the children, of the offspring. So it also has a strong influence of showing the surprise pregnancy. And the deception, the confusion, the misleading is that Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt had to hide the pregnancy until the divorce was official between Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston. So there's a lot of darkness, confusion, deception energies that both went into the relationship as well as as Angelina Jolie's pregnancy and the birth of their first child.
That's amazing. Do you know what was the dasha of Brad?
He was, yes, we discussed that in detail as well. He was in a Jupiter-Saturn period, and the Saturn energy will show signification for Brad Pitt as well as Jupiter being here in the 5th house for Brad Pitt. So Angelina Jolie, after the Venus-Rahu period, she entered a Venus-Jupiter period, which ended on November 2005. Less than 2 months later, she was able to announce her pregnancy. So it wasn't until the Antardasha of Rahu changed and a couple months later that she was able to come out, be truthful, be honest, much like the Jupiter vibration about her pregnancy. So this was very interesting, and we'll get into the cartography, but it's worth mentioning these karmic aspects as well. Now, Jolie's transition from the Jupiter period was to the Venus-Jupiter period was when she could first admit her relationship with Brad Pitt, as well as the pregnancy. The tabloids, the paparazzi, they all were asking Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt, are you in a relationship? Are you dating? All of these things. And they had to deny. They had to lie. They had to be false. They had to deceive. And this could show some of that Rahu vibration of Angelina Jolie during
Absolutely, yes.
her Venus Rahu period. Now, one of the interesting things is you will notice Angelina Jolie has a Jupiter line near California. Right here. This is a Jupiter line. This is also the Venus line. So there's a lot of significations here for Angelina Jolie in terms of the cartography influence here. And if you look at her chart, the Jupiter is in the 9th house. And we talked about the signification of the 9th house there. Rahu being in the 5th house also has its significations there. She has her Jupiter line there, as well as a Moon Mars, which is conjunct here. Moon Mars, which is conjunct here. So there's the Moon aspect, and the Mars and Moon are in the 9th house here. And all of these planets are within 10 degrees of each other. So they're all very close. Mars and Moon are in a war with each other. The Moon and Jupiter are in a war with each other. So there's a lot of conflict here and a lot of energies that aren't necessarily getting along with each other in the best way. So all of these significations are stirring and showing their aspect on the state of California for her, which is when she was filming a movie, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, where she began to develop her relationship to Brad Pitt. So these lines in signification with the Jupiter Mahadasha had great significations for her in terms of finding Brad Pitt, in terms of finding her partner and having this relationship. And the influence of the Rahu Antardasha is some of the darker aspects of the infidelity, of the lying, of the surprise pregnancy that manifested at this time.
Wow.
Yeah, some people, I'm not sure, but some people might not understand the symbols in the cartography, but they're easily available in the internet. Just people can check it out via Google or any other search engine. The symbols of the planets, like mentioned above here, for Mars, Moon, Jupiter, etc. Yeah.
And just to help everyone a little bit with that, just to go over these charts again here, this pink purple line here, this pinkish line, that's the Jupiter line. This dark green line here, that's the Venus line. This red line here along the coast, that's the Mars line. And the moon is conjunct with Mars at such a close degree that the Mars line is covering the moon line. But
I can see that now, yes.
You can think of the moon line as also being under this Mars line as well. And then for Brad Pitt, for example, there's a yellow line. This is the sun line. And then out in the Pacific Ocean, which has some influence over California here, is the Saturn line. So that will have significations in terms of Brad Pitt. For Pitt, you will notice he doesn't have many planetary lines in the west coast of the United States. So there is going to be a somewhat of a neutral energy. But the closest Navagraha line being Saturn off in the Pacific Ocean of the west coast of California, along here. So when it comes to areas that are neutral, which means I've seen a lot of questions by different viewers on this, when you see a place that does not have a lot of lines, it is not like that place is not significant for you, but there is not a great influence by one force over another. So it's the chart's karma plays out as it naturally should. But when there are no lines in a specific location for you, it'll be the Navagraha line that is the closest that'll have the greatest amount of influence. So for example, For Brad Pitt, the closest Navagraha line is the Saturn vibration here. So even though his chart will play out as a neutral energy, nonetheless, this Saturn line still has some influence over his chart, especially because these four lines here, they are just outer planets and they don't have as much signification. So it's the Saturn line here that is going, as far as the Navagrahas go, to have the strongest influence over Brad Pitt's chart. But again, his cartography in the West Coast. But again, there's going to be a neutral energy that becomes, because there are no drastic Navagraha lines there.
It will play out in between Jupiter and Saturn, if I see it correct, yeah? On the East Coast, we have a Jupiter line, and on the West Coast, we have Saturn.
Yes, exactly. And a lot of Brad Pitt's success overall has taken place on the East Coast. But the Saturn line at the West Coast, especially during Saturn Mahadasha and Antardasha periods, are going to bring him closer to the West Coast. And it's very important with Brad Pitt to know that, there are certain aspects here of Saturn vibration. Saturn aspects his ninth house. Also, Jupiter in the fifth house of romance and attraction. And the ruler of Brad Pitt's seventh house is Venus, and that is within Angelina Jolie's ascendant. So this is some of the reasons why their attraction might be showing up as well. But it was interesting that they both had Jupiter energies at this time. And Brad Pitt has Jupiter in Pisces in the fifth house, and Angelina Jolie has Jupiter in Pisces in the ninth house. So this would show a Jupiter Pisces vibration bringing them together. What we can know can be very powerful and spiritual, but it can also be very ungrounded from the material realm. So they might have gotten caught up in the astral aspect of their relationship at that time. So what Brad Pitt began his development of his relationship with Angelina Jolie in his Jupiter-Saturn subperiod. And it wasn't until the Saturn subperiod, when the Saturn on the West Coast pulling him there, that things really started developing. Now, the Saturn period continued well into the birth of their first child. And Pitt's Saturn is conjunct with Venus. So one of the interesting things is that when Saturn is activated, so is Venus. And again, Angelina Jolie being a Venus ascendant. So for Brad Pitt, his Saturn could not be activated without it also bringing in an activation of Venus. And this is an important aspect in terms of the activation of their relationship at this time as well. And this energy of Saturn and Venus, and they are friendly to each other. So this also, in a sense, even though being very difficult for him, felt very pleasurable or positive to him at the time. But whenever Venus is in, Saturn is involved, there are lessons, there are tests and challenges, and there are delays from the true outcome of something until. So this was a very slow and in times painful period involving a lot of work for Brad Pitt, including the divorce, including having to lie about the pregnancy and all of these energies, showing that Saturn-Venus relationship and some of the challenges. Now, the ruler of Pitt's seventh house, Venus, is conjunct with Saturn. So this is, again, showing this aspect. Now, Jupiter in the fifth house of children and romance shows this Mahadasha energy of Jupiter for Brad Pitt, supporting the relationship and the birth of Brad Pitt's children as well. Sometimes Jupiter in the fifth house, it can discourage children, but here it actually is bringing favor to Brad Pitt's chart, possibly because of its strong position in Pisces. Now, the Saturn line, as well as the Saturn subperiod, they show all these challenging aspects. They show all these difficult aspects of being married when his relationship to Angelina Jolie started. This could be seen as a traditional Venus-Saturn karma, Venus being the relationship and Saturn being all the work that has to be done to get to a place where that relationship can feel positive, when that can relate. And so it shows these obstacles, delays, struggles, and challenges, hiding his relationship with Angela Jolie while he was with Jennifer Aniston until the divorce was official, can show some of these more difficult Saturn aspects. And again, Saturn's influence on the West Coast shows that this energy for Brad Pitt was also being kind of brought to the West Coast, being brought to California for him.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's you know, I like this example because it's not all about the just the positive. It discusses the challenges that we face when we try to find romance,
right,
love, and marriage. There's infidelity, there's deceit, there's surprise pregnancy. All of these things can also be a part of it, and the cartography also has an influence on these aspects as well. It shows where we can find our marriage, love, romance, but that doesn't mean that when we find it, there aren't challenges that come with it. And I think this example shows that as well.
Perfect.
Yes.
So first I want to check before we go into this is Nirbe Lunagaria here.
So in this regard, we may, you stop for a second the presentation, and
okay.
we would like to bring him as a panelist.
Okay.
Yeah?
Sure,
okay.
Great.
There is a question from one of the participants, Shashank Walia. He is asking, but what if there is no line passing in a country I am born? There are only lines of such planets which we don't count, like Neptune, Pluto, etc.
What's the question exactly?
I think you have answered it already. You said that if there is no line going through any particular, for example, your birthplace, you say it is a neutral zone.
Yes, it is a neutral zone. And also, whichever Naha Graha line is closest, it doesn't even matter if it's far away, it will have an influence. So the neutral karma, it doesn't mean this energy is less significant for you. It doesn't mean that this energy is not powerful for you, whether it's your birthplace or the current place that you live. It's just showing that your chart karma plays out as it is without any great influence by one planetary line or another. And then also I've been asked a similar question that some people might be having. What about certain areas where there are 6 or 7 Naha Graha lines just surging through this one location? And much like the neutral energy, this is an energy where a maximum amount of planetary influence is there. So when there are 7 different lines in one area, this could show too much energy or a hyper concentration of planetary karma. So these places where there are a drastic amount of lines, this is an acceleration of our karma. So when we're close to this conjunction of a lot of lines, we get to work through our karma quicker. And when there are no planetary lines, we work out through our karma at a neutral or at a speed that is natural, at a natural speed. But when we go to a place, let's say there's 1 or 2 lines there, our karmas that relate to those planets are even further emphasized. So we can begin to do accelerated karmic work where those planetary lines are. For example, is the PowerPoint still being shown here?
Yes.
Okay, great. So for example, in my chart here in Pennsylvania, I have a sun line. In New Mexico, I have the moon and Venus line. So in Pennsylvania, my chart karma, it plays out naturally. But my karma as it relates to the sun, which is in the 10th house of career and life purpose, that karma will become more accelerated. So things will happen quicker. Things will happen more related to the sun. So my karma with that specific planet will become more accelerated. When here in New Mexico, my karmas that relate to moon and Venus become more accelerated. My guru and energies, my relationship energies, my romance energies, my higher education energies, these get further accelerated here. But let's say I'm in a place like Dallas, which is there's no direct lines going through the city of Dallas for me. That would mean that my chart karma plays out naturally as is there. But you will notice that a Venus line here in the west and a Jupiter line here in the east. And because those lines are close, they are also going to have a somewhat influence, making the karmas with Jupiter and Venus somewhat more accelerated or more profound during my time in Dallas.
Makes sense, yes. Nice.
Okay, great. So jumping to the first example here, can we ask if Nurbe Lunagaria is here?
Yes.
And perhaps he can join us on the panel as was mentioned?
Yes. So Nurbe, if you're there, please give us a quick hi and we'll make you panelist.
I guess he's not here.
Can you see the viewers? Because I cannot see them. Gautam would have to check if he's present or not.
Oh, okay. Let me check. Okay, participants. Yes, I can check. Okay, he's not here. So we shall move on from his example for now.
We'll move on, yes.
Okay. Okay. How about Manish? I think he is here.
Manish is here, right?
Okay, yes. Let's get him involved into our session.
Okay, let's get him in. But Inge has to make him panelist. Okay. Inge, are you there?
Let me see.
I don't see him in the search list of the participants.
Manish, you can find him?
Okay, let me see here. Okay. Manish. Yeah, I found him here. Manish Soni. He's when I searched viewers, he showed up there.
Okay, Gautam, can you make him panelist?
No, I can't. The host is to make him a panelist because the option to make in the panelist are the host.
Inge, are you there? Okay, Manish, there he is.
If you want, I can begin to discuss his chart without him.
We'll bring him on, yes, okay. Inge?
Yes.
Can you bring in Manish?
Gautam has to do it.
That's what I said.
No, I don't see any option to make him in. I'm a panelist. Only host can make him. I am not able to see any option to make him panelist over here.
I made you co-host now. And now, please try again. You go on the viewers.
Yeah, I'm in the panelist now.
Okay.
Hello, Manish.
He's muted. Okay, hello. Manish?
Here he is. Manish, we can't listen you.
Can you? Okay.
Yes? Please speak. No.
No.
Manish, your mic is not working. No.
I have sent you a chat message.
Yes. So we keep you there as a panelist. You have lots of background noise, Manish Soni. Yeah? So please, you listen. We can't. Your mic doesn't work.
Okay.
Ah, now it came. Speak.
Perhaps we should proceed discussing his questions without his audio.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm gonna get started then. But I know that you're watching this and you can hear me, Manish. So many blessings to you. And if you have any additional questions as I'm working through this, just type them in the chat. I have the chat over here on the right. So feel free to just type any questions you have into the chat. I received your question, Manish, of two questions. One was, when would I get married and where? And where would I meet partner of my life? So these questions are somewhat similar, but we'll take a look at them and we'll see what kind of answers we have. I have Manish's charts here. He is a Leo Lugna with the moon, and there are some important aspects here that we're going to take a look at as we get into answering these questions. When would you get married, and where would you get married, and where might you meet this partner of your life? These are Manish's cartography maps. They will come in handy. We'll flash back into these. One thing that's nice is your Venus line goes directly through India here. So that'll have strong significations when we start discussing it. But to kind of answer your question of when and where will you get married to find your potential life partner, we have to analyze certain aspects. Now, some of the key aspects worth mentioning is that the ruler of your fifth house of romance is Jupiter. So in the you have Sagittarius in the fifth house. And so there is a rulership of your fifth house by Jupiter. And the ruler of your seventh house is Saturn. But you will notice that Saturn is retrograde at 0 degrees in the seventh bhava. So you are going to have a very strong Saturn energy as relates to your marriage and your relationship. And I believe I have some ideas of how that might manifest. But yes, I mentioned here that there's a very intense Saturn karma as relates to Soni and some of his potential soulmates and marriage relationship. Now, in terms of answering the question when, it's important to mention that Saturn is a planet which delays, but it does not deny. And because of your Saturn retrograde in Aquarius here, it's important to know that there might be shown an aspect of the delay in the marriage, or certain challenges. There's certain obstacles in the marriage. And so while the date specifically of when you will meet this person is not necessarily known, what is known is that there will be a delay. That there will be a delay, there will be tests, there will be challenges, and that certain Saturn karmas, which can be difficult, especially for a Leo ascendant, are going to show themselves as relates to this karma. Now, your Sun Mahadasha begins January 2018, and since your Venus is debilitated in the second house, it shows more potential favor in marriage after the transition of the Mahadasha. So, for example, because of the debilitation of Venus in the second house, this might show that for the rest of this Mahadasha, it could show some difficulties in terms of the achievement of the marriage. And it might show more favor, more promise after the transition of this Mahadasha, which begins in January 2018. since the moon aspects your seventh house because it is in the Lagna, there is a good potential for beginning of marriage energy May 2018, when I notice you are going to enter the sun moon period. So I have an intuition that this will be a favorable time for you in terms of the potential marriage. And with moon aspect in the seventh house, the sun period with the moon antardasha, it could show strong signification. So maybe this is around the potential time where you actually get married, or this could also be the time where you start to develop that relationship with your soulmate or your soul partner in this lifetime. Also, there are certain strong aspects showing during the Sun Jupiter period, again, because Jupiter ruler of the fifth house, and again during your Sun Saturn period because of Saturn strong energy in the seventh house. So because of Saturn, there might be a delay in some of these areas for you. But overall, I would say that marriage will be the emphasis of the life when the transition to the moon Mahadasha, which means you can certainly already be married by this time. But the focus of the marriage, and because the moon is associated with family, that this aspect is kind of being shown during your moon Mahadasha, especially with the moon's aspect on the seventh house. So even though I have an intuition that you will be married before your moon Mahadasha, the marriage and the family, this will become the main purpose of your life during your moon Mahadasha from 2024 to 2034. And because of the Saturn karma, there can be a strong delay or show a marriage later in life or a delayed marriage because of the strong effect by Saturn. Now, you also asked another question, sir, in terms of where to meet my partner / get married. And so we mentioned some of the karmic aspects, but the Saturn and the moon lines have special significance in terms of this area because of their placement in the first and the seventh houses. Therefore, the strong potential to meet partners and unlock some progress or karma in this relationship department occurs in some of these areas where these lines might exist. Some of these lines I discussed, which is, in a sense, where these lines that I'm talking about, they're a place where you could go, where you might be able to experience some accelerated karma in terms of finding your soulmate or soul partner, but it also shows that you might be attracted or develop a relationship with people from these areas. So there's two different aspects. One is that you might prosper in terms of romance and relationships near these lines, and another that you might be attracted or develop a relationship with people from these areas. So some of these areas we talk about is the West or the Midwest of the USA. So here in this area for you, sir, you have a Saturn line, and next to that Saturn line is the moon line, and these are the two primary lines that we talked about, which have signification for your marriage and relationship karma. So here in the United States, you will notice that that energy is profound. So it's the possibility of accelerated karma from these areas. Also, if you notice, there is a moon and Saturn lines here in Japan, and it looks like East Australia. So not saying that you necessarily go to these places, but if you go to these places, it might bring this energy of romance, love, and marriage for you to the surface. And it also might mean that you might meet people that are from Australia, that are from the West Coast of the United States, that are from Japan. And these people have this potential for you to have attraction to these people, for you to develop a relationship to these people. So that is a signification there. Now, Saturn is further emphasized because it's your decay at 0 degrees. It is up the lowest degree. So Venus line does show support in this area by natural significations of Venus, but is challenged by the debilitated state of Venus. Therefore, in India, which is where your Venus line is, even though it generally has significations for marriage, love, and the romance, that because your Venus is debilitated, it makes these significations slightly more challenged, slightly more extreme, more difficulty in these areas. So it's not as if this karma isn't brought to this area in India. It certainly is, but nonetheless, it might show that you might still have some difficulties here, challenges as relates to the debilitated state of Venus. Now, Jupiter rulership of the 5th house, there's an energy here of romance and traction, dating possibilities. We like to go to the 5th house before we go to the 7th house. I like to think of the 5th house as dating and the 7th house as marriage. So this is a place where you might meet somebody. You might develop a relationship with somebody, but it's not necessarily has its strongest indications for marriage, more like the beginning or the development of the relationship. And so you will notice different places where there's Jupiter line, East Coast United States, Greece, Norway, and Peru. You might be attracted to these people in these areas, and you might have success in romance and dating in these areas. Here we notice a Jupiter line not too far from Hawaii, here in the Northeast United States, New York, here in Peru, here in Greece, here in so those are some of the main areas that say, okay, if you go to these places, it might have potential success for you in terms of dating, in terms of romance, in terms of feeling that romantic energy for you. Let me just check to see if he asked any questions here.
No, don't.
Okay. How does that resonate for you, Manish? Does that feel like your questions got answered here? Because I tried to cover everything. Okay.
Manish, please, as we can't listen your audio, please type into the chat if you have any additional question on that regard. If you could follow the presentation of Kṣaṇāti, that will be very helpful. Yeah.
Meanwhile, Kṣaṇāti, I have a question for you. What are the circles in the lines?
Okay, so the circles, let's go back here. The circles are very significant. On a metaphysical level, I believe that they show our past life karmas. So these are vortexes. These are the area, these planetary lines where the energy is the most concentrated.
Energy center, okay.
Yeah. So for example, here for Manish, they're all in the ocean here, and obviously his past lives didn't come from the ocean. But there's an energy here where there are past lives being brought into the Pacific Ocean, energy from the Pacific. But here there is a Saturn vortex in Brazil. And so this might show a concentrated energy of Saturn in this area which means there's potentially Saturn karma from past lifetimes in these area, that this was the main energy place where it was centered. And it might also show that in terms of Manish's relationship, marriage energy, that Saturn would be the most concentrated here. So it's possible, but because Saturn is going to be a mixed effect for a Leo ascendant, it's showing both the challenges and the rewards of the Saturn energy here.
Very well.
Mixed also, Saturn and Moon there, if I'm correct, yeah? They're very close together.
Yes, and with the Moon aspect on his 7th house, it also shows a strong romance marriage indication there for him. And it also shows that by the Moon aspect on the 7th, there's also, in addition to this aspect of the relationship, there's also the aspect of family being brought in. And for a marriage will lead to a family, and that this family will be a theme of Manish's life. Even though that the marriage might be delayed, that the marriage unlocks this deep concept of family and the home.
Wow, wonderful.
Okay. It says, no, sir, I don't have any questions, and thank you for answering my queries. Thank you so much, Manish. I'm so happy I could support and show you some different aspects in this area. Thank you for sending those questions in to me.
And I think it is also very important to mention again that Saturn don't deny. Yeah?
Yeah.
He delay, he frustrates. That are the main points, but he don't deny.
Yes, which shows that it really is because it guarantees these things in some sense. You are meant to receive these things in the lifetime. I like to think of the reason why Saturn delays things is because if we receive anything before we are meant to receive it, then we are not prepared to receive it. And Saturn will delay these things until you are fully prepared to receive them, so that when you do receive them, you are completely prepared and ready for them as well.
Wow.
Well said.
Brilliant.
Well said.
Then he said, please think on this fundamental question of astrology. Why are you born in so-and-so Lagna, Taurus Lagna, Karka Lagna? Why not in some